Does anyone else love the Pepsi Max Mango? This is just so good. It's like a drug to me. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rosario and sometimes I like to read books. Today I'm going to be doing my kind of winter wrap up, so I'm going to be going through all the books that I've read from January to March. I've been trying to play around with the format of these like wrap up videos because I feel like sometimes I'll try and do monthly wrap ups, but I don't read too many books, so there's too few books in the video. And then if I try and do like seasonally wrap ups, like quarterly, it feels like there's too many books to talk about. So I think I'm gonna try every 3 months. So this is January to March, and then we'll see how it goes from there. Okay, so the first book that I read was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross, and I gave this 4 stars. So this is kind of the sequel to Divine Rivals, which is kind of like this a World War I inspired fantasy where there are 2 gods at war, and we're following two main characters, Iris and Roman, and they are 2 like war correspondents, and it's kind of like a fantasy, kind of a romance. So you get this cute little romance, and you get to see all of this kind of like fantasy setting about these gods and these warring factions that the humans are then involved in. This follows on from the end of Divine Rivals, which I'm not going to spoil. We get to see a lot more of the action and the fantasy of the world. We get to see a little bit more about what's going on with these gods, and we get to see a little bit from their point of view. But the one thing that I felt like was a bit missing in this is that it didn't flesh out the fantasy world as much as I wanted it to. Like, I was so interested in these different gods and this world, and we do get to see little different parts of the kind of fantasy world. I still wish it was just a little bit explored a little bit more, and I think some parts of this became a bit repetitive where we are kind of recapping bits of the first book. I feel like that bit could have been taken out and we could have replaced that with a bit more of the like kind of world building. That would have made this a 5-star for me, but it was still really, really enjoyable, and I love the cute little romance in it. Okay, and then the next book that I read is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, which I gave a 5-star. This is kind of a thriller about Maggie, who when she was younger lived in this house with her parents, and one day her parents left in the middle of the night, fled, and claimed the house was haunted, and they had to get away from these kind of haunted things that were happening in this house. And they even went as far as to write this book about their experience, and it's become this kind of like minor celebrity case, like a minor haunting, like, you know, in the world, this house that's really haunted, and the dad has wrote a book about it. As Maggie grows up, she kind of doesn't really believe this story. They never really talk about it. No one will bring it up. Like, they won't really talk about it with her parents. But Maggie doesn't really believe this. She doesn't really know what she believes. So when her father passes away and leaves her the house to inherit, she decides she's going to go there, flip the house, because she doesn't really believe it's haunted, but she does wonder what her parents were hiding in this house, or why they can kind of concocted this story about the house being haunted. So Maggie kind of decides to flip the house. She's staying there to kind of like work on it. She kind of gradually starts how strange things happen to her, and she kind of gets compelled to kind of look into the things that happened in that house when she was there. So we get like excerpts of her father's book, bits of the book he wrote about things that he said have happened then. So you kind of get these different kind of narrators and different kind of perspectives of what's happened, and the book pulls you in so many different directions about what's actually happened in this house, and whether it was like fact or fiction, like was it supernatural, was it not. You kind of like, I went back and forth so many times. Riley Sager did such a good job of making you kind of second guess everything that was happening. It really kind of like leaves you questioning what's real and what's not. Okay, and then next up I read A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, which I gave 4 stars. This essentially follows one of Dracula's brides who is writing letters, much like in the original Dracula, detailing her relationship with him, and it's this kind of abusive relationship that she has with him and all of the people that kind of also get involved with that. So the book starts with her saying, essentially, I'm sorry that it's come to this, and I'm sorry that I had to kill you, essentially. So we kind of open with the story of how things got to the point of her having to kill him. So it follows this kind of an abusive relationship and the descent into that, and it's very beautifully written. Like, the writing is very beautiful and lyrical. I found parts of this a little bit repetitive, so it kind of like, it feels like while you are kind of figuring out how she came to having to kill him, it feels a little bit like he kind of can see what's happening and what's going on, and it happens a bunch of times where he picks up different people, so it's kind of this like polyamorous relationship between them. But it was enjoyable. I enjoyed reading it, and I gave it 4 stars. And then next I read Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, and I gave this 5 stars. This essentially follows Eleanor, our main character, who is completely fine until she realizes that she's not. Without spoiling the book, it essentially follows Eleanor, who is kind of dealing with all of this trauma that has happened in her life. Like, there's some very, very heavy topics in this, so definitely look up the trigger warnings for it. It also has all these little heartwarming moments where she's learning to open up to new people and experience new things, and while she's not deliberately trying to kind of get through her trauma, she kind of, that ends up being what this story is about. It's just her kind of dealing with these things and just having all of the, going through these tough things, and also having all of these other like heartwarming, nice moments and with other people, and just, you know, changing her life. It's very heartwarming. There's a lot of mix of emotions in this book, but I really enjoyed it. Okay, and then the next one I read is Orange, the first volume, which is a manga following a high school student in this kind of sci-fi slice of life little romance, where this high school student is sent a letter from her future self telling her that she needs to change some things to save one of her new classmates' lives. It follows her and her little friendship group, and the little friendship group is so cute. They're so wholesome, and the interactions are like just like a little bit of banter, but they're also really like caring, and they really look out for each other. Like, they always try and put the other people first and put others above themselves, and I just think it's such a cute little friendship story. And also they're all kind of like just very caring, and I love them. I can't wait to read the second one. Okay, and the next book I read is This One Sky Day by Leonie Ross, which I gave 4 stars. I read this for my blind date with a book video, so if you want to hear some more in-depth thoughts about that, go and watch that video. So this essentially follows 3 different perspectives on this island where people are born with different abilities. So there might be something good, like really like helpful and useful, like healing, or being able to make food taste like anything, or they could just be something completely mundane. People are just born with different abilities, and that's just the way kind of things are there. And we follow these 3 different perspectives of these characters. All their kind of narratives kind of link together in the end, and it all kind of follows these different events that are happening. And I think there's a lot of like commentary on society and gender and things like that. It was a bit of a wild ride at times. Some things happened in that book which was, you know, one of the big plot twists, or like the big kind of plot points, was very strange. So it's a very memorable read, but it was enjoyable. I think sometimes it felt like it took a bit too much on, but nonetheless I still enjoyed it. The next book I read was Jujutsu Kaisen, which is another manga which follows a high school student who gets involved in this group of Jujutsu sorcerers, who essentially are this kind of like secret organization who are tasked with destroying curses, which are kind of like, you can get cursed objects and you can get curses which kind of feed off negative human emotions and kind of manifest in these kind of demony kind of things. This was the first volume, so we're kind of just getting used to the world and all the different main characters, and so we get like a little cast of like these students and then like kind of their teachers. And I know so many people love this series, so I'm really interested to keep going, and I can see the different kind of character dynamics that are already forming, so I'm excited to continue with this. I gave this 4 stars. It was funny, it was action packed, and overall a really good time. And then next up I read No One Can Know by Kate Ellis Marshall, which I gave 4 stars. I love Kate Ellis Marshall's writing. This one I think it wasn't my favorite of hers, but it was still really strong. So we follow Emma, who her and her sisters, when they were younger, were sleeping out in their treehouse, and one day they find their parents dead, and no one really figured out what happened there. Emma, however, was the main suspect for different reasons, and following the murder of their parents, they kind of got estranged, didn't really speak, but they all had this house under their name. Emma then few years later, as an adult, she falls on hard times and needs somewhere to live, so she decides to tell her sisters, I'm going to go back and live in the house. Then they all kind of come back together because there's something that no one can know, and there's different secrets, different things going on, and you kind of follow this story as little bits are being uncovered about what everyone does know about this murder and this secret that has been going on for a long time. Lots of twists, lots of turns. Kate Ellis Marshall is really good at that, I think, pulling off really good twists that aren't too unrealistic, and she does a really good ending. She gives you just enough to be satisfied, but always gives you something to be intrigued or think about afterwards, which I think happens in this book for sure. Yeah, this one wasn't my favourite. This is the second adult kind of thriller that I've read from her, but I really enjoyed it still. I think I find some little bits a bit convoluted. Nonetheless, still a really enjoyable read. And next up, I read Ascendance of a Bookworm, which is another manga about a woman who loves her books so much that one day she's piling up her books in a stack in her library, and one day she accidentally knocks them over, they fall on her, and she dies. She's literally killed by her love for books. So after this, she is reincarnated as a 5-year-old in a world where there seems to be no books. So kind of getting to grips with, 1, being a 5-year-old, and 2, being in a world where there seems to be no writing or no books anywhere. So we kind of just follow her on her journey. She kind of starts to try and figure out how she can get some books, can she make them, how can she find things like that. It's fun, it's funny, the characters are cute. I love our main character because she's book obsessed to a fault that it's funny, and I am really excited to learn more about this world and pick up the second volume. And then the next book I read is Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. I gave this 3 stars, but yes, this one is about essentially a woman who is going through postpartum depression and kind of the challenges of being a mother. It's very, very heavy, and it's very heavy and hard to read, I found. And I think I enjoyed the writing style, but it's very stream of consciousness. So we follow her and everything she's doing, everything she's thinking. It feels very stream of conscious, and it's very heavy topics that are being talked about. While I enjoyed the writing style, I don't know if I enjoyed the kind of just stream of consciousness of it. It felt a bit a lot. I enjoyed the writing itself, so it was just very easy to read, and I really enjoyed the kind of juxtaposition of the kind of positive emotions and the kind of unconditional love versus the more complicated feelings and loss and identity and not feeling good enough and things like that. I think I don't really enjoy reading about postpartum depression. That kind of skews my enjoyment of reading about the topic, what is being conveyed and how it's being done. I think it's meant to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. Some parts I also found the kind of repetitiveness jarring to read. It just felt a little bit repetitive. I do find it a little bit, I don't know if this is hard for me to say, but I do find it a little bit boring when someone's talking about unconditional love. Just completely. Okay, and then next up I read Ordinary Human Failings by Megan Nolan, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This essentially follows a family who have a child who's been accused of essentially murdering another child. So we follow this accused family and different perspectives of theirs as they're being interviewed by a kind of news reporter who is trying to get this first scoop on the family and the situation. We follow the different characters of the family, and we kind of see their own perspective of their own life and all of the different things that have happened to lead them up to this point, and all of the kind of as the title says, ordinary human failings that they have gone through, that their family have gone through, that have shaped them and kind of their relationships in relation to this girl and how she's ended up being accused essentially of murdering another child. And then we also see these characters as they're being interviewed by this kind of reporter who is quite ruthless in wanting to get this story about this family in this kind of tragic circumstances. We kind of see what they will say to him, and it also kind of looks at that kind of predatoriness of newspapers and reporting, as well as looking at different topics about the working class, motherhood, identity, and especially a lot of things that I thought was it looks like generational trauma and how those things are kind of passed down and affect different people up to this point. And I think it's a really interesting look at different dynamics and how they can change over time and how they can change families. I found this so compelling. It's very, very character driven. It's not necessarily about like the child and whether she did or didn't hurt this other child. It's more about kind of using that as a lens to look at all these different failings and different things that have happened to this family, and how they've got to this point, which I thought was really, really interesting and really compelling to read. So yes, those are all the books that I've read from from January to March. Let me know if you've read any of these or if any of these are on your TBR. It's been quite a good few months of reading for me. I haven't given anything less than a 3-star, so I think that's, you know, relatively good. Let me know how your reading's going so far. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you're reading down below. Leave a mango emoji for my Pepsi Max mango if you've got this far in the video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!